Hello and welcome to the Idifico Insights podcast. So excited for this conversation today. We have Kyle Visner with Quark Constructs. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, Quark Constructs, yeah.
Quark Constructs, got it. Okay, we should say it right. So Quark Constructs, very happy to have you here. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you, Maddie. Happy to be here. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes. All right, so the audience here is mostly commercial real estate and construction. So tell us about your career and feel free to really dive into the details to help give them an idea of kind of where you've been.
Sure. So I graduated from Rochester Institute of Technology with a degree in computer science, specializing in robotics. Did some work actually while I was in school on humanoid defense department robotics, mostly around manipulation of hands and other kind of similar activities, opening doors, picking up tools, that kind of stuff. After graduating, I did what a lot of people in 2013 in tech did, and I went to work at kind of big tech companies like Amazon doing massive web sites and similar kind of work. So, back-end systems and handle terabytes of data. And then did that till about, after which I left and started a consulting company I have for the past 8 years, Future Perfect Engineering, and we specialized in IoT. Basically, I'm taking that robotics and embedded remote systems background, fusing it with kind of the web development and web systems background in kind of this new emerging market. Helped launch over 20 hardware products with clients, from medical wearable devices, construction wearable devices, I have a client in that sector, to kind of fully automated robotic small building, and also some sensors for the government, stuff like that. And then we...
Sorry to interrupt, but really quickly, can you help us understand IoT? What is it, and like a real world example of how it's used?
Sure. So IoT, Internet of Things, is the buzzy name for it. Basically, it's taking computers and putting them in things that are not usually computers, and then connecting those to the internet in some way, so we can gather data from them or issue commands to them, right? There's kind of only two things. You either gather data, think like a camera, like a security system camera in your house, right? It's streaming data back to the cloud so that you can see what's going on remotely. You could be somewhere else, you get notified, hey, you see movement in your house, and you can look, right? And the flip side of that is you can tell things to do things when you're not there. So in a smart home sense, it could be like light bulbs, right? You have these smart lights in your house, you can use your phone, you can turn them on, you can turn them on from anywhere in the world. In construction, that might look more like wearable technologies that detect a fall and automatically alert someone, or that might look like sensors within the building when it's finished, or even while it's constructed that detect fire, air quality concerns, power concerns, and then also your kind of modern building management system, right, where you can control them all remotely, but using the internet and other technologies. So that's in a nutshell kind of what I spent the past 8 years doing. Was kind of building a lot of devices in that sector for clients. So
so much fun and amazing and a little bit scary too, I guess, and I see it as my job to kind of help educate people in some ways on why this is more amazing than scary. Right? But it's pretty cool technology. And I think we also just have to trust humans that, I think that we're just at that place where that's what we have to do, right? So what was kind of the defining moment for you when you realized that you wanted to build what you're building now?
Sure. So, kind of funny story. So I was working on a proposal for actually a government contract we were trying to win that involved remote controlling compressed airbags for lifting things, which is the thing that the Army does a lot because they use trucks in places that you can't call a tow truck, and you have to fix them and get them up in the air. And so they use compressed airbags or some things can work in a rough terrain environment. As part of that, I was looking into dual-use applications. Like, hey, what if they choose to fund this? Like, what else can we apply a control system for controlling a bunch of compressed airbags through? I'm like, well, jacks and other kind of lifting technologies like that seem like complementary. That and this was last year.
Okay.
I started going down that rabbit hole of like, how many kinds of jacks can there possibly be in the world, right? As I started looking, it was the number of kind of permutations of a very simple, like I would have something that is on the ground and I would like it to be 18 inches in the air,
Yeah.
kind of device. You know, you have everything from screw jacks, scissor jacks, pneumatic jacks, you know, pole jacks they use for shoring up houses or foundation, trenching things. So as I went down that rabbit hole, it's kind of amazing to me that there's no automation, no configurability, no smart tech at all in any of these systems. Like, you're just constantly trying to have the right piece of equipment you need to get the job done on hand. And coming from tech, where I assume you're on a laptop, right? I have a laptop right here. One moment I can be recording a podcast on that laptop. The next minute I can be doing word processing. I can watch YouTube. I can play games. I can write software. And it's just one machine. And you have like this application software on top of it that lets you do
Totally.
An infinite number of things. So it was very surprising to me that construction and smart spaces like that, that model doesn't exist. And it's not just jacks. Like I spoke to hundreds of folks about the industry, and it's like all the way down, like scaffolding, scissor lift, a crane, it's all very purpose-driven, low-tech machinery. So that's kind of what drew me to the space, where I was like, there's something strange going on here that I don't see any kind of automation meaningfully on job sites at all. And that's kind of what really piqued my interest initially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday I was at a NAOP breakfast. Are you familiar with NAOP? It's the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties. It's kind of like the foremost like commercial real estate organization in Seattle. And, so there were several developers or construction managers on stage talking about things. And I asked the question how they feel AI is going to change the industry. And one of the individuals who clearly has a lot of time on her hands to study this kind of thing, she mentioned robotics as one of the things that she believes is going to change the industry dramatically over the next 5 years. So I thought this was a timely conversation, certainly. And it's exciting to see that there are some people in the industry who see it coming and seem excited about it. So you spent 5 years building or more than 5 years building end-to-end. So from firmware to AI. So how do you think the fragmentation in construction affects innovation velocity?
I mean, I'd say it is the central problem of innovation in construction, right?
That's right.
When you think about innovation in a really boring, like MBA class kind of way, strip away AI, strip away robotics, strip away anything, just like what innovation is. It's a company or a government or someone invests money or resources to make something new in the hope that they can reap rewards from that in the long term, right? So if you have a factory, you might add some automated technology to your assembly line. Let's say you spend $10 million building it, adding robots to your assembly line, and then over the next 5 years of that line runs, you get to reap 500% return on that as your cost of goods goes down, right? Kind of things like that. Because that's not how we build buildings, right? Instead, you have this entirely temporary contract-based organization kind of gets built out to build that one project. And this is true whether we're talking about a single-family home to a stadium, right?
That's right.
And then when the project's done, that entire organization kind of dissolves away, right? Like from the general contractor, the developer, their contractor. Now, they might work together in the future, but at that point, their relationship's kind of done.
It's even based industry. It's
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly, but even down to like the subcontractors, their relationship with their workers is temporary, right? When that project's done, that worker might go back into the pool and end up working for a competitor on the next job. So that means that I make a short-term investment and reap long-term rewards. The long-term never shows up. right? There is no long term.
That's right.
So
Most. There's long term for some asset wise, right? But
yeah,
for very few.
yep, that's exactly right.
Yes.
And so so then you think about back to that whole thing of velocity of innovation. There's no one in that entire organization here who has like making the next building more efficiently than we did this building as like a primary concern.
That's right.
Yeah, they're really, you say innovation velocity. If you look at the data, right, in construction, there's no velocity, right? A construction worker today is 40% less productive than a construction worker in 1970, right? That's while there's innovation kind of within the silos, like general contractors are now like they're using BIM, right?
Sure.
And you might see, a masonry contractor, a framer, starting to use battery-powered things instead of gasoline-powered things. That's like marginal stuff. It's not going to move the needle, right? So yeah, I'd say it is like the fragmentation is kind of the problem.
It is. Yes. And so I think honestly we just have to rebuild the entire industry from the ground up. That's what I believe at this point. It was really interesting. So the person representing the general contractor, she seemed actually to not want to answer the AI question. And what she said is, I think that eventually it's going to build some efficiencies into our project management, layers, right? And I feel actually that this is what Idifico is going to do. But again, it's ground up working with the developer from the very beginning of the process and then observing what AI can do and what a human still needs to do and just build it that way in partnership with the individuals who know how to build the building and the developer, right? And then just building the AI layer into the project management system, those individuals, and then you start, it would be really interesting. We need to definitely keep the conversation going offline. When you come in, could be very interesting, and we are working with developers. So, but so like, is robotics going to replace labor? And how do you see that coming to be?
The simplest way to think about it is that at least what we're looking to do, right? We are not looking to replace kind of the skilled labor of assembling the building. That's incredibly hard of ROI. We're actually looking at how do we make the whole construction site flow more efficiently from a logistics standpoint. Without looking too much detail, we want to get the people to do the work, the materials they need to do the work, and the equipment they need to do the work at the same time, just in time to do the work.
That's right.
But when you think about it from a more of an abstract way, what we're really talking about is increasing productivity of workers. Now, if construction was a shrinking market, then yes, it would be like, oh, well, then by definition, we're going to replace some people, right?
Right.
But it's not, right? The untapped demand for construction is massive. I think these are all kind of guesses, but I think McKinsey estimates it's like $1.5 trillion a year of stuff doesn't get built.
That's right.
The construction industry can't meet demand. So the amount of productivity you have to increase by to actually replace people's jobs is so massive that's like not what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen is we're going to build more stuff. If we make building houses 50% more efficient, so we actually have to build 7 million more houses or something right now, depending on the estimates. So there's so much to be done that's not getting done that we're not really talking about replacing labor. We're talking about just using the skilled people we have, the craftspeople, more efficiently. And I actually think one of the things that will happen is it will allow skilled craftsmanship to re-enter the industry in a way that's kind of gone away, right? If you look at even in like basic residential stuff, right? People they're like, oh, I love craft from like the 20s and 30s, right? Back when they used to like spend a lot of time like milling and building in cabinets, all that stuff. Now, if you look at houses now, they're like a lot of ornamentation is gone.
Yes.
And you could say, well, it's trends, Scandinavian design trends, all that, but also a lot of it is they're so expensive to build now that you can't be like, let's add an extra $200,000 in ornamentation. That's not
Right.
going to work.
Right.
So,
And that really doesn't even get you much, it's okay. But
yeah.
I mean, I live in the north end of Tacoma, like near Stadium High
Yep.
School. So
Yeah.
all the homes around here, we'll often walk our dogs, and my husband will be like, I can't believe that someone, created this rock wall, or, and he's like, think of what it took to like lift all of these things, and, how patient people were and willing to
Yep.
do that work, and it is beautiful. So yeah, to reduce the labor and still be able to create something like that through technology is mind-blowing and exciting for sure.
Yeah. Definitely.
What do we have next? Let's see. So, okay, we did say construction has historically been low tech for a reason. The stakes are high and failure is really expensive, and that's true. So, how do you design robotics that can survive that level of pressure?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. That's probably one of the most interesting things coming from tech that I've sort of learned as I've interfaced with with the construction industry. In tech, right, oftentimes the upside of innovating is massive and the downside is pretty small, right? Like if Apple, well, they're doing it right now. If Apple, they're launching, they just had their event yesterday, they're announcing this new UI that they've developed and all this stuff. It's possible it'll be successful. It's possible people will hate it. Apple will be fine, kind of one way or the other. If people love it, they'll make more money. If people hate it, next year they'll fix it, or they'll roll it back. Whereas in construction, it's almost the opposite, right? If you're a contractor, you kind of have a capped upside. It's like a pre-negotiated margin of like 5-10%.
Yeah.
And your downside is basically bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
So, it's, when you think about robot things, the biggest thing to think about is how you design the business model around them to make it possible for the industry to adopt them, right? Because you're not going to go in there. I mean, just if you invented, I don't know, even like a flying drone that could like go and drop, entire modules of buildings into place, right? No contractor could buy that, right? Because if the first time they tried it caused a defect on the building, they just go bankrupt. So they have no easy on-ramp.
That's right.
To adopting those kind of technologies, which I think is what's been holding robotics back in construction a lot. Is there are a lot of companies that they make this cool robot and they're like, now we're just going to get subcontractors to buy it. Subcontractors are like, I have no idea how to buy this thing. Even if I want to, I can't buy it.
That's right.
So when I think about robotics, it's about one, making the robots themselves, making them safe, testing them, meeting ANSI standards around human interaction, all of the kind of technical stuff. The biggest thing is how do we now build that adoption on-ramp for contractors, for unions, for property developers, right? That there's a way they can adopt these technologies but not put their businesses at risk, even the property developer, right? It needs to be the technology needs to be proven to the point that they can pay for it with a construction loan, right? They can't finance a property development with traditional financing and dump that money into speculative R&D. Like there's actually rules-wise they can't do that, right? So you need to make sure that you are not compatible kind of with the restrictions in construction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed, and I think that's kind of where we're at with Idifico as well, and kind of figuring out what those challenges are and realizing, that it is going to take some funding on the front end to do R&D piece, So, and one of the things for us is the insurance piece and risk piece, and so I actually have a new kind of co-founder who is really, he comes from insurance, and so we're having conversations too, so it's interesting, but
cool.
It's exciting for sure.
Yeah, very.
So what's something about construction that surprised you once you started building for it?
It's kind of funny when you talk to construction folks. When you look at construction, people go driving down the road, they're like, why is everyone standing around? Why is nothing happening here? Why is we've all had that. You're like that building, nothing has changed nothing much. What is going on?
Totally.
And then when you talk to people within construction. Like, this is something I've heard time and again. Like, oh, we're dinosaurs. We don't adopt tech. You know, blah blah. I've heard people refer to themselves as dinosaurs. Like weekly, it just seems like a refrain the industry seems to tell itself.
Yep.
But you know, the more I've spoken to people, everyone is making everyone's very smart. They're making the correct decisions based on the incentives they presented and the constraints put on what decisions they can make based on the industry. So back to like the property developers, it's like, why don't property developers, you know, do more innovative, right? Well, it's because if you fund something with, you know, construction loans or real estate investment, right? There's a lot of strings attached to the money that really limits decisions they can make. Same with, and on the flip side, subcontractors, the same thing. It's like, well, you know, contractually, I have to get this deadline and get this done and, you know, minimum, or else, you know, I'm risking financial ruin, right?
Yeah,
so,
you layer on top of that, like all the, you know, permitting issues, you know, and everything that the state and the jurisdiction requires. And so that's challenging too and frustrating for them often. So it is. Exactly. That takes up a lot of brain space. Like, how do you innovate when that's where your brain's at all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and even just really like kind of stuff like, how do you pay for it? Like, that's like if think like a construction company, like your average construction subcontractor is less than 10 full-time employees and making less than like $5 million a year. And when you're doing 5% margin on that, there's just not that much money to do innovation, right? There's not that much money to do even like basic, like just continuous improvement process. Like, you have to pay someone to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, the industry is the way it is for good reasons, right? And I think, you know, as someone who's trying to go in and innovate, it's important to understand those incentives, understand, you know, obviously when people think about robotics, we think about, you know, productivity of workers, all that stuff, you know, improving safety, all that. The other thing, like, I find myself thinking a lot is how does this shift the incentive structure such that now we can unlock innovation on the job site in a way we couldn't before? And I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
And so have you come to any final conclusions, or?
The short answer, I think, is yes, if it's done right. So I think there's a lot of robot attempts in construction right now of trying to solve and like value-added things. Like Canvas is this well-funded robotics startup out there that does drywall finishing. Right, it can finish a drywall. The arms on it can go up like 20 feet in the air and like rub the wall and do all that stuff. And then there's some others. I think Hilti has like it goes on it like can drill holes, and then there's the ones that do the chalk layout on the concrete pad stuff. Dusty robots stuff. But lost my train of thought.
It's a lot. Yeah, we're just thinking about the conclusions, right? Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so when you think of all those, when you think about those robots incentive structure, right, I can tell you with kind of absolute certainty that the way we're going to build buildings in the future is not that you're going to ship 10,000 super specialized robots onto even a small job site and I'll have them do little tasks. Like, that doesn't change the incentives in a way that some people can adopt those, right? Whereas, like, when I'm looking at what we're doing, it's like, by trying to solve logistics and like trying to focus on how do we make, in a broad sense, a construction site much more productive and efficient. What it kind of can do is if you can change the cost structure and labor, maybe moving from a lot of temp workers to a lot of more like full-time employees, that then subcontractors can invest in those employees rather than having to always be working. If you have temp workers, you can't invest in like advancing the careers of those temp workers because they go work somewhere else. Whereas if you imagine if you were like a basic masonry contractor, right? If you were 5x more efficient, you could have the bricklayers be on your full-time staff. You could invest in education for you. You could invest in improving safety by measuring how they work together and finding little ways to make that safer, right? Like that's the kind of boring stuff that like manufacturing companies do. If you ever go in a plant, right, you have the line running, and then you have people they just walk on like clipboards. Like that's what they're doing. They're like, these people keep bumping into each other. If we find a way to not have them not do that, we'll be able to run 3% more efficiently. They're less likely to get injured. They're all kinds of stuff gets better, right? So yeah, if we can make these companies more efficient to the point that they can operate kind of more like what we think of as normal companies, then they can just be more profitable. They can invest in people. They can actually. I think we can unlock huge amounts of growth in the industry.
But what if we go through the thought exercise of perhaps there are no companies any longer, and instead everything is based on the project, and every individual who participates in that project is invested in their own way. Like, I mean, there are certain people out of Silicon Valley who are saying that like within 50 years, we will no longer have companies, right? So if that's true, and not everybody's betting on that, right? But some are, and I think that we are going to have this hybrid idea, which is what I'm betting on with Idifico, right? Is this idea that we can be a project-based industry and then that we can supply for the talent in a more cohesive way when they're all sort of part of the same network, right? And so if that was also true of labor in some capacity, which there are some companies out there who are doing some version of that, like what would that look like from your perspective?
I think I think it looks similar where if you can professionalize, what you're talking about is professionalizing kind of a lot of construction tasks, right?
Right.
Professionals, it's the same kind of if you think like law firms, right? They kind of operate like that, right? And they're adopting AI very quickly. A little too quickly if you look at the news. They keep getting busted for fragment AI makeup cases. But I think it kind of goes back to that law firms, their profit margins are really good, so they can afford to invest in improving themselves in a way that. So I think it's kind of the same thing. If you were envisioning, getting rid of you snap your fingers and kind of got rid of the entire contract structure, and it was just like property developer and then a bunch of professionals. Yeah. I mean, the way you make those professionals is you have to have enabling technology that takes them from a super niche laborer to a more generalist, empowered generalist who can invest in themselves. That's right. And invest in they're empowered through the system, through the sort of business in a box idea where there are a lot of things that they don't consider themselves good at that AI can actually do if you build it right. Like just accounting or invoicing or, all of that. So that's what we're building in, right? Yeah. And so but that isn't necessarily for the labor. This is for, Yeah. So this would be for, in your world, like what you're talking about, that the subcontractor who owns a company that has about 10 employees. It's like the owner of that. And instead of having the 9 others work with them, like they don't need them because the AI is, and then they're just connecting directly with the owner. When the owner enters the scope of work in, that that they are immediately connected with a bunch of individuals who can do that scope of work, right? So yeah. So it's just interesting to think of that from even the labor perspective, like the bricklayers or those who are doing that kind of work. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, so let's see. You're building robotics that interface with highly variable environments, right? How do you think about, edge computing and autonomy and adaptability in that context? That's a good question. I think on one hand, it's highly variable in the sense that it's outdoors, the job site changes over time, and I think the way we're looking to handle that is really AI plays a big part of it, with computer vision, being becoming incredibly powerful now, where we can look at a scene that we've never seen before and still be able to infer how we should move through it, as well as low cost but very capable off-road and basically not inside factory floor kind of robotics. Affordable to the point we can actually deploy it on these job sites. So I think those two combined help deal with a lot of the variables, as well as the fact that everyone's using BIM models. If you have a 4D model of what the building's going to be like, in principle, the robot should know the state of the building at any given time if we can plug into it. There's also one of the biggest thing that we are probably going to have to solve is that once we start talking about putting robots onto job sites, we're going to talk about the fact that people leave just their stuff all over the place, and they're not going to be able to do that anymore. Because if you just leave park a telehandler in the lane that we've designated as this is how the robots kind of get to and from where they need to go for the day, that'd be a real problem, right? So there's kind of two ways. One is like AI. A lot of the stuff is very good. We can leverage it to navigate environments. They're not as variable as like a war zone or some of the places where a lot of this stuff is really fast, right? We actually, because of BIM, because you just have rules about like where people put stuff, we can make them not as variable if the upside's there, right? To actually drive that change. Yeah, that's AI and kind of the ability to do clever controlled things is also a major part.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm curious on your thoughts around timing.
Yeah.
Like I'm always trying to predict like when is this going to tip? When are we going to be at a point where some of this actually is adopted and like where do you think you're at? I guess if you're comparing it to like where we were at in the 90s, like internet was sort of it was a thing that nerds used, right? Yep. And then you sort of get to the point where, it's mainstream. Like, what are you thinking for the industry in general when they'll start to sell these?
So you're already seeing some robots in the commercial sector. They're not doing a lot of work. Like, there's a lot of they're using for like reality capture. Like they integrate with like open space, and the dog walks around with LiDAR and cameras and scans everything. That's not going to affect productivity at all. It's kind of a risk mitigation thing. When you talk about that kind of stuff, I think it's already kind of coming in on the commercial side, and that will continue to kind of grow over time. In terms of robots doing work on construction sites, I think you'll see like we hope to start getting some things out within 2 to 3 years, and then I think honestly you'll see robots actually doing work more initially on the residential side first, and then going into commercial over time.
And what do you think is the reason for that? Like, why do you? I mean, it's great because it is what we need the most, right? But is that the driving factor? Do you think, or is it something different?
I would say it has more to do with the risk profile and the timelines than anything else.
Okay, sure. That makes sense.
If you're building, and also the stability of the market, right? So like we're in Seattle. If you built a robot that was specialized in working in vertical construction in towers, 5 years ago we had 20 tower cranes. Now we have 2 or 3. So it's kind of hard if you're like a startup being like, hey, we're going to enter this thing, and then like at any given time there may or may not be customers that exist because interest rates go up and down. So I think that's one thing is on the commercial side, timelines are so long, the projects are so high risk. So there's so many rules. There's everything from like union rules to environmental studies to like just the timelines are insane. They're showing up and be like, hey, can I drive my robot around your incredibly high risk commercial project? I think that's kind of the problem. Whereas on the residential side, just startup and some innovators got a lot more bites at the apple, right? Of like, and I think you already see that now. If you look at like Icon, like the concrete 3D frame folks down there in Texas, there's a couple other ones. They're all starting in residential because they can build a house. They can learn from what that process is like, update their system, build the next house. Whereas if you're doing that like data centers, you're like, well, we built one data center in 5 years. What did we learn? It's like, well, at the current rate, we'll actually get this into the market in 2075.
Right.
But so I think you'll see it in there, and then it'll over the next couple of years you'll start to see it in there, and then it'll bubble up.
Yeah, I'm hoping that at least 5 years. But I've decided that, my level of patience is, it's to the test every day. And we just, the whole thing for me is just don't give up, right? And eventually when the tip happens, you're going to be there for it,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we gave you a megaphone, right? And
Yep.
to a bunch of developers and an owner and a GC, which is a lot, what do you want them to understand about the role of robotics in their future?
I mean, look, the data is incredibly clear about the state of the construction industry, right? Since 1970, the industry leaks 1% productivity year over year. Still, it continues to do that, right? There's a shortage of 500,000 workers as of last year. With change to immigration, that number is probably going to explode this year.
Yeah.
So the status quo, the way things are going now, it is going to, like, the musical chairs are going to stop. They're going to stop very soon, right? The cost to build a home in Seattle, I think, is approaching $500 a square foot. Like, that's obviously not going to work.
Right.
So robotics will be the defining technology of construction in the coming decades. It's just a matter of who solves it and what the exact way that it comes in, but it must be, right? Like all of the demographic and economic forces are going to force that to happen one way or another.
Yeah.
So if you aren't part of the solution, you're going to get hit by the wave.
That's right. That's right. Do you think that we're missing, maybe there's something you have seen or observed that I don't know about, but are we missing an organization whose sole purpose is to bring together all of these ideas, all the people who are out there trying to innovate, to kind of inform each other of what's being worked on so that it's not just this, because I almost feel like, are we in that place again where even the robotics companies are like siloed because competition or, and really what they need to be doing is at least informing each other so that you can see where you're at in the construction stack. And, yeah. What do you think about that?
I think, yes. I think there are some organizations that are trying to be that, like Built World. Right now, I think Built World is so tied to general contractors in its focus that I'm not sure that they're, like, I don't read what they put out or kind of the projects they're kind of championing, right?
Yeah.
It's very GC focused, and GCs don't, for being honest, your GCs don't do most of the work, right? They're not their people. They're not the ones actually laying bricks, pouring concrete, doing this, right? Their ability to control that is kind of, I would say, I think there is a vacuum in the industry of an organization or like a profession almost that is charged with innovating on job sites.
Right.
There's no one, you'll hear you stand around how productivity is going down in construction. You'll hear it from reports. If you've read like the new book Abundance from Ezra Klein, they talk about it in there.
Yes.
And when people talk about the causes, there's so many causes, it's hard to understand why, but when I was in high school, I had a band director who had a saying, you're always either getting better or you're getting worse. If you're practicing, you're getting better. If you're not practicing, you're getting worse. It's never stationary, right?
Yeah.
So like when I look at like why is there productivity in construction? It's because there's no one whose actual job it is to work on it, so it doesn't. So it just slowly degrades, right? Because things don't stay stagnant. So back to your point. Yeah, there's no one who really is championing like this is how we reimagine how we build stuff. Outside of there's startups like us trying to do it, but like from within these companies, right? There's no one who's like this is how we change how we build buildings to make them better.
Right, and the thing is that as we've discussed, they're not incentivized to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. None of them are. Yep. I've been thinking about, so Rosemary, who is the CEO of Built Worlds.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about having her on the podcast.
Yeah.
I should have her listen and just get her take, a hot take on this. But I
have nothing personally against Built Worlds.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the thing is, like, I can appreciate that, they have to stay alive and be funded.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it's the GCs who are doing it, and they're great GCs, by the way. Like, I do want to say that, that I do believe that the most innovative GCs are the ones who are involved with Built World. So, that's awesome. So, and I think they're doing a good job. It's just, it does seem like it's missing. So it would be cool.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
love that. So
Yeah.
what's your dream at the end when you look back? What will you be most proud of accomplishing?
I mean, I'd say right with what we're looking to do with Quark. I know on this podcast we're talking more about commercial construction.
Yeah.
But I'm a millennial, right? And I have kids.
Yeah.
So when I view what is the defining problem of our time, it's that it is becoming unaffordable to live in the places we want to live. Mm-hmm. And it's like my generation's younger than us. Like this is the problem of our time. So it's a very exciting problem to work in. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very challenging too. But when I say I want to look back and say, what you're saying, I'm so glad I accomplished this. Right? If I can look back and say, we have millions of people for hundreds of thousands of dollars less, that would be huge.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the long-term aim of what we're looking to.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for being with us. I think this has been the most future-thinking conversation I've had on the podcast so far. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure. It's always great to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, we'll definitely stay in touch.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.
You too. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.